Hey, welcome. I'm glad you're here. This is, I'm in a bit of a race to get this done. In fact, there's going to be a lot of rough edges to go over as we try to figure out how I'm going to do video and get it out with the newsletter. And since I only have something like less than an hour to get out the door from when I'm talking right now, because we have a class to teach. Mrs. Little is right there. She's just right there. She's frowning at me. Anyway, okay, so we're going to do what we're going to talk about today is the road ahead for 2018. I'm not going to talk about everything. I'm going to talk about the things that I believe to be the most important. Now, like many of the shockcasts of more than a couple years ago, I pretty much read out what I was going to talk about. But this time, I'm not really going to do that, partly because we don't really have the time. But the other side is, I'm not sure that you want for me to actually sit there and read for you. What I would like to do is just really tell you and give you another view of what you might be reading in what I wrote. So, as I start out, I'm really bad at prognostication. I don't know, well, let's just say I'm very bad at timing. I don't think I can predict timing very well. So I'm not sure that you can trust me in all of this. But there are a few things I think that you can trust me on. The first one is Egypt. So Egypt, it's a disaster waiting to happen. That's how I started it out. And here, let me read what I said. There are too many people, too little education, and not enough water. The corruption is truly amazing and has always been truly amazing. Once upon a time, you did commerce using letters of credit. You might need to be old enough to remember what those were. I won't get into how they work, except that they are just like cash. And they are backed by the full faith and credit of the bank that issues it. And for a very long time, you could trust the letters of credit issued by the banks of every country except two: Egypt and Nigeria. And everybody knows about Nigeria, or you should. Anyway, it also has the second most powerful military in the Middle East, and the level of corruption is so incredible. There's no words to describe it. It's just, it's just one of the most corrupt countries on the planet. So we have a problem, though. When you add corruption with military firepower, and you know, if all that you have is a hammer, every problem is a nail, guess what they're going to try to do when things start falling apart in Egypt? They're going to start using that military to try and suppress the problem. And what's the problem going to be? Well, you saw some of the problem in 2011 with what they call the Arab Spring, or I guess at that time was the Egyptian Spring, when they threw out Mubarak in 2011. Well, guess what? The military was reluctant to do anything about it. But do you remember what those riots really were about? The news media didn't tell you. The riots were about two things: the cost of bread and the cost of natural gas. Those were the two things. Well, guess what? We've got something worse coming. And this is going to be water. Okay? So let me get down to the quote that was probably the most important. Water availability issues in Egypt are rapidly assuming alarming proportions. And by the way, this is, well, let me finish the quote. By the year 2020, Egypt will be consuming 20% more water than it has. With its loosening grip on the Nile, water scarcity could endanger the country's stability and regional dominance. It is imperative on the Egyptian government and the entire population to act swiftly and decisively to mitigate water scarcity, implement water conservation techniques, and control water pollution. develop plans that would install more efficient irrigation techniques and control water pollution in order to avoid disaster. Well, guess what? They're not doing it. Okay? And here's the thing. Let's see, 2020 is 2 years from now. What do you think comes online this year? Now, I know they keep promising this. They keep promising. I mean, I've been kind of predicting something based on those promises. But here's the point. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is rapidly nearing completion. Turbines have been, as far as I know, the turbines have been installed. All they have to do is the final concrete work to finish the dam. They could actually start filling that dam right now. And they promised to finish the dam by October, if I remember correctly. They said by the end of the Ethiopian year. Okay? The question is this. The Ethiopians, or should I say the reservoir that will be created by that dam, will contain the equivalent of a year's worth of water that flows through the Nile. Egypt depends completely on the Nile. They've got about 96 million people. And only 10% of the Nile actually reaches the Mediterranean. What happens when the flow of the Nile is cut in half? Because that's what will happen when the Ethiopians claim that they will fill that dam in a maximum of 3 years. A maximum. How many people are going to die? Half? Half of 96 million? Would you say? And this is going to be over 3 years. The Nile will be cut in half over the course of 3 years. We'll see what happens, but 2018, I'm sorry. Just read Isaiah 19. Just read Isaiah 19. It's going to be really bad. Okay, so the next thing I talked about was cryptocurrencies. That's a bubble. I mean, that's a bubble. There is, right now, when you have pole dancing instructors giving advice on cryptocurrencies, I think it's time to get out of cryptocurrencies. Or should I say, it doesn't mean that you should get out, but you need to be really careful. This is a lot like the dot-com bubble from the 1990s. If any of you were around and paying attention then, I was in the high-tech industry at the time. I essentially lost my second technical writing job because of the dot-com bubble when it burst. Okay, so, but remember this, the number one rule of investing is don't lose all of your money. In fact, don't lose any money if you can help it. That's the point of investing. The number one rule is don't lose money. Well, the problem is that a lot of people are going to lose money. A lot of money. And my hope is that you won't be one of them. So, the point is, I guess, is how can you tell who is going to be the winner in this bubble, in this mania? Who's going to survive? When the dot-com bubble burst, there were survivors, and those that were on that train made lots of money. So the question is, who's going to survive? And for me, there are two rules that would indicate the possibility of a good survivor: usability and flexibility. Right now, I don't see Bitcoin or most of these cryptocurrencies don't really seem to be usable or flexible. If you can't buy a chocolate bar with it, you got a problem. And I don't know. There's only two that I can think of right now, and one is Ethereum, and the other is Ripple, which is being used by the banks for interbank settlement. They call it, the nickname for Ripple is Bankster Coin. So, it's up to you. I don't know if, I will not be, I don't think I'll be getting into any of it. You know, I'll certainly be something I'll be praying about. If I do ever decide to do anything, you will certainly be the first to know. That is the case. That is for sure. I kind of share everything. Now, the next deal is corruption. This is important because when you look at the popularity statistics, who is at this point in time more considered to be more trustworthy? Congress? Senate? President? Maybe the president definitely is more than the Congress or the Senate. Government? How about the military? Of all, the military has the greatest reliability and credibility according to the Americans, the average American. So that tells me that when things start falling apart, when faith in government and government institutions start to fail, people are going to ask the military to step in and start arresting people for corruption, because corruption is getting out of hand. I don't see how we're going to fix this. I really don't see how we're going to fix this. And the thing is this, I don't see the will to fix it. The Senate and the Congress, they've seen it, they know about it, they've done nothing. I don't think it's going to happen. And I'm sorry. Do you really trust Jeff Sessions to actually fix this problem? I don't know. I'm cynical. However, now, we've talked about Egypt, we talk about cryptocurrencies, we talk about corruption. I believe the most important is Gog and Magog. As I wrote in my book, Ezekiel's Fire, and I wrote that book because the implications of what's going to happen are, a solar flare that will last long enough for you to be able to see that it's 7 times brighter than the sun normally is, where the moon is as bright as the sun normally. That's going to destroy civilization, or at least most of what we call civilization. The world will recover, but not before maybe 1 billion people die. So let me start a little bit and read a little bit here. Gog and Magog will not launch an invasion of Israel in 2018, as far as I can tell. But the players in this invasion will become more clear, just as they became more clear in 2017. Khalifa Haftar will consolidate his hold on Libya, and his alliance with Russia will grow ever stronger. And it wasn't until December of 2016 that I saw Haftar rise high enough to see his significance. Haftar did a lot in 2017, and I'm betting that he will rule all of Libya before 2018 is over. And remember, Libya is a key part of Gog and Magog. Russia, Iran, and Turkey will continue to increase their efforts to gain influence in Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Sudan, all areas where Cush is present. And again, remember, Cush is a part of Gog and Magog. This encirclement of the Sunni Arab Middle East will continue to terrify Sunni leadership. And if you've been watching carefully what the Saudis have been doing, fear it's obvious. No one arrests the princes of the Saudi royal family and shakes them down for billions of dollars each if they didn't feel a little scared. Okay. The question is this: will Hezbollah launch its second attempt to bloody Israel's nose in 2018? This is in the context of the collapse of ISIS as a unified rebel movement in Syria, and this means that Iran will have free access to Lebanon and the Mediterranean Sea, which has been a key objective for Iran for a long time. The Iranians will try to mop up any opposition that remains in Syria while sending as much support as they can to Hezbollah. But as you notice, the current riots and demonstrations, the Iranians are a little upset by how much money and effort and supplies and all the rest have been sent to Hezbollah in Lebanon. They're not happy. Now, the question is this: will Israel launch a preemptive attack on Hezbollah by starting the war first? It is rarely a good idea to wait until your enemy is strong to fight him, especially when you know that he's going to fight you. The best time is when he's preoccupied and weak. Right now, Hezbollah has been preoccupied with defeating the rebels in Syria, and they might be called in to settle the riots that have broken out in Iran. And yes, in the previous riots in 2009, Hezbollah was brought in to help shoot demonstrators. Problem is, will they do it again? Does Hezbollah have the manpower to actually do that? I don't know. Just remember, it's a time-honored tradition to bring in foreigners to do the dirty work, to shoot your people. It's always been the case. Russia did it. Well, anyway. Now, here's the question. So if Hezbollah is preoccupied, Israel might attack, or might not. But if it happens, the blowback could be incredible. It might be the moment when Damascus is destroyed, as spoken by Isaiah 17. But it will also be the moment when these two verses are fulfilled. So those of you that anticipate the destruction of Damascus from Isaiah 17, please understand the context. And verses 3 and 4, and I'll read it here, are the context. The fortress also shall cease from Ephraim, and the kingdom from Damascus, and the remnant of Syria. They shall be as the glory of the children of Israel, saith the Lord of hosts. And in that day it shall come to pass that the glory of Jacob shall be made thin, and the fatness of his flesh shall wax lean. I'm sorry. That is not a positive development. It's a necessary development. As often is the case when you desire repentance and a bringing back of the nation to God, a lot of times it requires some very serious difficulties. I'm not looking forward to this. I'm not. This could happen this year. It might wait until Gog and Magog comes in 2019 or 2020. More likely 2020. And yes, Gog and Magog is that close. We're seeing the alliance come together. It might wait even beyond 2020. I can't make a firm designation here, a firm prognostication. The problem is, this is such a serious thing. The ramifications are so serious that I spent a long time writing this book. And you can see what I'm talking about here in Ezekiel's Fire. Go to ezekielsfire.com. No apostrophes, no spaces, whatever. ezekielsfire.com. And click the link. It's in the article. If I'm right, you could die when the lights go out, unless you can survive without electricity. Please understand, if we're 2 years out, if we're 3 years out, I'm not sure if that's enough time for you to prepare if you aren't already preparing. I don't know. Not for me to say. This is for you. But the thing is this. I see Ezekiel's Fire coming. And unless someone can prove to me that Ezekiel's Fire is not correct, that I've misinterpreted the chapters and verses of the Bible that speak of Ezekiel's Fire, and you have to go to Isaiah 30, Zechariah 12, and Isaiah 30. Okay, just a second here. Am I remembering this incorrectly? Isaiah 30, Zechariah 12, and Ezekiel 38 and 39. The point is this. If my interpretation is wrong, prove it to me, please. I really need to, because this is a huge weight over on my shoulders on this. Okay, so let's get into just a few of the other details. They have a saying, it's darkest before the dawn. It's a stupid saying, but it's understandable. It's like when you're going through hard times, sometimes that hardest time is oftentimes just before things get better. Well, there's a corollary in my mind. In my words, my way of saying this is, it is brightest before the sun sets. When bubbles pop, when things fall apart, everything seems to look just bright and fantastic just before it happens. It's always the case. There's always that manic, euphoric high just before things fall apart. 2017 looked great. 2018 could also be great. What happens next? Please be careful. When everybody thinks things are awesome, be careful. Things may very quickly turn to be not awesome at all. So it's a word of warning there. The fundamentals are really bad. The stock market is so overvalued. Bonds, I wouldn't be in the bond market for all the tea in China. I wouldn't be in the bond market. That scares me to death. And I used to be investing. I was in the 1990s. I'm not a financial advisor anymore. I'm not a mutual fund manager anymore. So I'm not offering professional advice. I'm only telling you what I would, or in this case, would not do. If we are entering a grand solar minimum, and we have indications that we are entering a grand solar minimum, we'll see more and more evidence of this in the coming year. I believe that. I think we're seeing it now. Things have gotten a little cold, although here in Taiwan we're pretty okay. We're going to see more and more immigrants flooding into Europe. And this is fulfillment of prophecy of Matthew 24:7. It really is. It's not the only part of it, and there's more to I believe there's more to Matthew 24:7, where ethnos, or nation, shall rise against nation. You need to be aware. I wouldn't want to live in Europe right now, unless maybe Eastern Europe. I don't expect a war with North Korea, but then again, there's a lot of things we don't see of what's going on. And I believe that Putin will win re-election in 2018. He's going to continue to be the, as my term is, the bugaboo of NATO, the EU, and the Democrats. Everybody's going to love hating Putin. In fact, they will probably want him to win just so they can continue hating him. Now, as far as for me personally here, the Shockcast hopefully is back. I mean, we're going to be, there's a lot of rough details that we're going to have to work out. Things don't work out smoothly as you launch something new, and this is pretty new for me. This is only the second video that I've done where I'm sitting in front of a camera and talking to you. So let's go over just a few of, let's see, what time is it? Okay, got a few minutes. Maybe we can talk a little bit about some of the research that I've seen. Remember, Monday was the circumcision of Jesus. The commemoration of the circumcision of Jesus, or the feast of the circumcision. And yeah, it's a real thing. We're not joking here. I'm not sure that I don't really believe that was the correct, January 1st was the correct date, but it's up to you. Doesn't matter. But it's an interesting thing. That's the reason why January 1st is January 1st. Why it is significant. It's the commemoration of the circumcision of Jesus. Let's see. We have the road to revolution of the Iranian uprising. Stefan Molyneux was very emotional over that. I don't know where this is going to go. The mullahs in Iran. Remember that here's something to understand here. Notice that it is the citizens of those who live in the cities. They're the ones that are demonstrating. Those in the countryside, they're not demonstrating. They're okay with all this. They're the ones that are radicals. They're the ones that are the hardline Islamists. Those in the cities, they're the ones that are more liberal. The liberal, you might say, it's this, in terms of Iran, the liberals are rioting. I don't think, unless there is a lot of, well, we'll just have to see. But I don't think these will last. But we'll see what happens. Now, here's something else, and this is an interesting quote. It's the YouTube video, "Shocking Reality of Everything." at the 45-second mark of this video, some guy named Sam Harris is talking. And he says this: we have to admit that we're in some sort of process of creating some sort of God. Now would be a good time to make sure that it's a God we can live with. I mean, that's big. We're built, I mean, these are secular people that are acknowledging that we're building an artificial intelligence that we're going to worship as a God. That's what we're doing. I mean, I go into some of these other things. In fact, you'll see a little bit later where there's a couple of videos where talking about machine intelligence and building dystopia. And I was a little bit a part of it. I mean, I was a technical writer. The job I lost because of the dot-com bubble. I was working with a group of software developers that came out of Israeli military intelligence. In fact, the commander of the unit took his unit after they all left the army, left the military, and they formed a company for the purposes of doing natural language processing and for civilian use, not for military, for civilian use. And I won't go into more details than that. There was nothing highly classified, other than the fact that it was using machine learning techniques. I mean, this was back in the 90s. And even then, it was almost like a black box. I mean, they understood how they constructed the process by which a machine could learn. But you couldn't actually sit down and point at those parts that the machine was picking up. There was almost an organic quality as to how the machine would learn. You'd set up the program and then you'd feed it all of this text so that it would understand what text, how to recognize text, and at the same time the process of answering questions. You know, you would feed it a question, and if it didn't answer correctly, you would tell it wasn't correct, and it would learn what questions were. It would learn that it was incorrect in certain areas, so it would modify itself. This kind of self-modification, I mean, this was what we were dealing with in the late 90s. Right now, you can. Who knows what we have? Who knows what we've got in our future this year? Another thing is, rap overtakes rock as the most popular genre among music fans. You can read what I wrote here, but that's a bad sign. I'm sorry. Rap music is about anger, resentment, violence, revenge, intimidation. I mean, this is a picture of society that you don't want. We also have an article, and this was horrifying. A 10-year-old New York drag queen founds a drag club for kids. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I look at this stuff and I can hardly believe it. Okay, so let's go through a few more things. I don't want to hit everything. We've got. Well, let's see. I want to get down to. Actually, in the gold and silver and cryptocurrencies, there is a discussion about Ripple. Now that's an interesting one, and Ripple, talking about Ripple in terms of, because they're using it for settling interbank settlement, in terms of settling currency transfers and things like that. I mean, that's very interesting. It's also part of the system. This may very well be the bankster response to cryptocurrencies. And there's some very interesting discussions in there. Got some humor pieces, as always. A discussion of morons. David Wood went through, he finished out his series on sort of the conflict between, there's been a rising conflict between Muhammad and Paul. And so he really has been addressing that for the past couple of weeks, and he finished it this week. A lot of very interesting videos. You can go through that. Gog and Magog. Yeah, I don't always remember even what I wrote. We'll have to see. But this last one, we're starting to see conflict over natural gas in the Eastern Mediterranean, and I really believe that's the fuse that will get all this started. Well, okay, that's it for this week. We still have rough edges to go over in terms of the shock cast. Lord willing, you'll get a chance to, well, see this become more polished. You know, maybe I'll smile more. Maybe I'll whatever. Anyway, I hope that you have a great weekend. Mrs. Little and I are off to go teach our class. Lord willing, we'll this will get processed and out into the mail. If not, you know, you'll get the newsletter, and we'll see how this works. Again, this is early days for me. Okay, we'll see. Okay, anyway, bye till next week.